Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first COVID-19 live town hall meeting. I'm going to be joined this morning by our Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Johannes Britz, and as well as our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administrative Affairs, Robin Van Harpen. First, I want to give you an idea of what today's event will be like. As you can see, we're working from home in compliance with the recently extended State of Wisconsin Safer at Home Order to Stay Healthy. So this is going to be a casual conversation. In fact, I imagine few of you are at home in your pajamas. I know when I put my suit coat on this morning, my family said, "Where are you going?" Just rather unusual. We're scheduled to go for an hour. The first half hour is going to be where Robin, Johannes, and I will cover some what we consider to be essential information, and then we'll open it up for your questions. Speaking of questions, over the last week since we've had this town hall announcement, we've been fielding a lot of your questions, and we'll get to
Jay, do we have audio?
Chancellor, you muted yourself.
when did I do that? Looks like I've muted myself. I'm going to go ahead and continue with where we are, unless you want me to start over. What are we saying on the audio tech side?
Start right after your introduction.
This whole thing is introduction.
Tell him right after questions, Jay, right after questions.
Okay, so before I share any of my updates, I want to express my thanks to all of you for everything that you've done to adapt to the COVID-19 world and what we're in. You've been absolutely remarkable. There's no question of the things that we've done and the incredible magnitude from seamlessly moving our course content online. That includes over 7,300 sections of 6,000 courses, to our virtual and tele-advising and counseling, to helping move legions of students out of our campus residence halls, to calculating refunds, developing new systems. It's just hard for words to express the magnitude of gratitude that we all have for everything that you've done. Meanwhile, at home, what you're managing is also remarkable. Many of you are schooling your children at home, dealing with aging parents, naughty pets, and perhaps feeling cut off and isolated from our loved ones, colleagues, and others. I hope you're all taking good care of yourselves and coping with the rapid changes in our work and home environments. Now I'm going to quickly share some updates, most of which I've been keeping you informed about through my emails and other updates that have been coming from the campus. Our online instruction has been phenomenal, as I've pointed out. We've put in place a number of interim policies. The work that we've done around leave, our on-site and off-site work practices. Both Johannes and Robin will talk a little bit more about those. There's been a tremendous impact on students in terms of their instruction, housing, finding new ways to connect. In fact, on that front alone, we have distributed hundreds of laptops or provided them for low or very near low cost. We've expanded our food pantry offerings. We've distributed in emergency grants alone, as of yesterday, over $64,000. There is also, as you know, a fairly high level of state and Milwaukee COVID-19 orders that we're complying with, and that includes how we've had to accommodate a number of campus activities. Those include cancellations, postponements, notably commencement work that's going on, that we moved from May 17th to October 10th, and our Board of Regents meeting will be not hosting in June of this year, but resuming that in June of 2021. We're all working remotely, or should be, and then we're providing COVID leave until early May for those who cannot work remotely. On the financial impact, I'm just going to say a few words here because we're going to go into more depth a little bit later. As you know, before COVID, we were facing a deficit. We had some reserves to address this, but now with COVID, there are refunds for our housing, parking. There's no refunds for our seg fees or online fees. We've had significant lost revenue in dining, retail, housing, transportation, and other areas. We're also incurring new costs, support for our employees, new IT needs, communication, and other areas. We're working through those revenue loss projections for several scenarios. All are larger than anything we've ever dealt with before, and those impact the larger campus. We also face many unknowns in terms of when we're going to return to in-person operations. What we want, of course, is that thriving campus full of people, students, faculty, staff. So you're going to hear more details about those in terms of scenario analysis and financial areas. So I now hand it over to Provost Johannes Britz. Johannes.
Thank you, Chancellor Mone, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of our perspectives from academic affairs. The Chancellor alluded to the fact that we were able to actually flip more than 6,000 courses in 2 weeks. We only had to cancel 37. And as the Chancellor did, I also personally just want to thank you all for doing this, for our efforts, for everybody in support of our students. I know it is not easy. I know it's a time of uncertainty. And so just on a personal note, thank you. The second is we also did put in a process for the tenure clock extension for those of you who are affected by the virus, as well as indefinite status clock extension. And with the support from the University Committee and the Academic Staff Committee, we put in place interim grading policies for both graduate and undergraduate courses. We have also decided not to do course evaluations this semester, but rather encourage feedback on course content as well as the delivery mode. And we also have made an early decision, well, as when we could, on that summer will be fully online. We have also introduced a hiring freeze and also put a limit on the spending of funding. And also newly, I just am in discussions with the University Committee on the impact that the virus might have on sabbaticals of our faculty members. And we have also extended the travel ban to June 30th. And as Chancellor Mone has alluded to, I also want to say a few words about how do we plan for the fall semester, but also for the future, the post-COVID-19 scenario, because it will change and we have to be able to position ourselves post this next semester coming, and how do we think about the future of the campus. I'm working with the deans and with the shared governance groups currently and our students on scenario planning. We actually will have a number of meetings this week as well. I think there are 4 possible scenarios that can play out. The first is, as Mark mentioned, the kind of the pre-COVID-19 situation where it will be all normal and we will go back as we had known it. Of course, that is the much preferred scenario. I think it's highly unlikely that this will take place. I think there are simply too many variables that are unknown to us and as well as out of our own control. We don't know if the virus will be contained by then. Will there be another surge? What role will geography and location play? And this is something that I've picked up more and more where people say, well, this county might be clean versus that county not. This campus might open fully, this one might not. So we will have to see how that plays out. And then what will be the health controls in place? We don't know that yet from a state perspective or a federal perspective. So I think on scenario 1, it is highly unlikely that we will go to a normal situation as we had known it 5 weeks ago. There is a second scenario that we're working on. And looking at the variables, that is where we say, well, what if the virus is being contained, but health control stays in place? And I think for the scenario planning, that is for us as our campus perspective, probably the best scenario for us, where we will have a scenario of a hybrid return to the campus, where health control systems will be in place, but we look at a scenario where, well, are we going to wear masks? Are we going to be more testing? Will there be kind of social distancing on campus, in the library, in the union, in the classrooms? Are we going to have smaller classes on site, larger classes online? And also, are we going to be more flexible as it relates to the calendar? Are we going to start a bit later, or are we going to be flexible on certain days? And then, well, how will it leave us to instruction? Might instructors choose whether they teach online or on site? And will we start opening more our research labs? And then hopefully when there is a vaccine, will we return to a more normal situation in the spring of 2021? There is, however, also a third scenario. What happens if there is an effective response to the virus, but suddenly again a surge, say in October or in November, and that will change the scenario again, where we will have to revert back to a fully online scenario. And then the fourth scenario that I want to lay out here, and it is probably the worst case scenario, but I do think we have to be also realistic in our campus planning and in responsible planning for our future. And that scenario is, say, should, despite of all societal and health efforts, we still are not able to contain the virus, and we still don't have a vaccine. That means we might have to do fully online in the fall semester and as well as the spring semester in 2021. As I mentioned, this is the worst case scenario, and I hope it don't play out that way, but we still have to plan accordingly. There are 6 variables I think we have to take into consideration in these scenario plannings: enrollment management planning. How do we do and train our instructors if we have to continue fully online? What about our students and their specific needs? What about courses that cannot be offered online if you think of nursing and clinical placements, as well as our financial implications? And over back, Mark, to you for Robin to talk about the financial implications.
Okay, thank you, Chancellor Mone and Provost Britz. Good morning. I also would like to start my comments this morning by thanking our faculty and staff for their unbelievable work in moving our courses online, and our employees and students largely off-site, as well as responding directly to the health and safety crisis. These efforts have been extraordinary. I would not have believed ahead of time that UWM could achieve so much in such a short period of time. I also want to particularly thank the campus for working so hard to move as many employees as we can off-site, working hard to follow our guidance for on-site employees. These efforts to reduce the people that we have on campus have played a vital role in helping to reduce the spread of the virus here in Milwaukee County. There's no denying the fact that this situation has had an unprecedented impact on UWM's financial health and outlook, just as it is impacting our entire global economy and the financial health of all of our individual employees and families. Prior to the COVID-19 situation, we were facing a budget shortfall this year, with the largest factors being our fall of 2019 enrollment declines that were larger than expected, as well as our additional pay plan expenses. Through our enrollment management function and staff and our budgeting processes, we had made plans for next fiscal year to increase our spending on financial aid, marketing, and student support, while cutting expenses across every unit on campus in order to significantly reduce the operating deficit next year. The COVID-19 situation has now created a much more challenging scenario for us and for all institutions of higher education. As a result of COVID, we have now almost overnight incurred another $8 to $10 million roughly in losses just for this fiscal year, which will end on June 30th. These losses are largely due to the refunds that were provided and lost revenues in our auxiliary units, such as housing, dining, parking, transportation. We've also incurred a myriad of new expenses in managing the crisis and moving courses online. We've been asked to document those expenses in a fourth request for stimulus funds, and they run into the millions of dollars. All of these losses and expenses are well beyond what any one unit or the units can manage on their own that are facing them. This is truly a campus-wide situation. Beyond the known expenses and losses that we're seeing right now, we are also working with Johannes and the Chancellor in modeling the financial consequences of the various scenarios that Provost Britz just discussed. And again, the largest financial drivers for us will be related to not having our students and activities on campus and any resulting enrollment declines, whether it's in the fall or continuing throughout the entire year. The impact of these future losses could well run into the tens, if not approaching $100 million if this lasts the entire year. And what makes this especially challenging to model and plan for is that we may be dealing with a sort of hybrid situation in the process of transitioning back from online status, possibly with setbacks along the way. No matter which of the scenarios materializes, is very clear to us and every other impacted institution of higher education that the financial impact from these likely scenarios will be much, much greater than any revenue decline we've ever faced before in our history, and any year-over-year revenue decline that we could possibly have conceived of before the situation occurred. We have received positive confirmation that UWM will receive about $8.5 million in federal stimulus funding under the CARES Act, in addition to $8.5 million in student aid. This is very welcome news. However, this help, in addition to any other help that we are likely to receive from the outside, is not going to come close to address the financial impact that we will face. That is why we have to look at every available tool to help ourselves buy time to get to our new normal. Thankfully, we started this fiscal year with some carry forward balances that we've saved over the past several years. But pre-COVID, those equated to about 60 to 68 days of operating income. Those reserves will not carry us unless we act as fast as we can with respect to every other available tool. As we look at every tool, our end goal is not to mechanically reduce expenses, but rather to take action that will allow us to emerge from this crisis as strong and best prepared for the new normal as we can. We've talked a lot in the past in relation to past budget situations that our workforce salary and benefits represents the largest expense that we carry as an institution. We will not make it through the situation unless we significantly reduce those expenses, at least temporarily. For that reason, UW System has been in the process of developing a new tool for furloughs that would allow institutions to avoid or delay taking the more serious action of layoffs right now. Furloughs are designed to be temporary, allowing institutions to temporarily reduce workforce and salary expenses. Yesterday afternoon, the Board of Regents gave approval for UW System to develop and finalize this policy, and a draft has now been circulated publicly. The furlough policy is also needed not just to address the fiscal consequences, but also because we have to do something to address employees who are not currently able to work once the current system COVID leave expires. So what is a furlough? A furlough is an unpaid, required leave of absence that is intended to be temporary. Under the UW System draft policy, there are three main types of furloughs that will be permissible as elected by each institution. The first type, per the system policy, is across-the-board furloughs. These are the type of furloughs that Governor Doyle used in 2009. An institution can elect to require employees to take a prescribed number of unpaid days off throughout the year. This results in salary savings for the institution in exchange for time off for employees. The second type outlined in the system policy are position-specific furloughs, which are based on individual employees who are not able to work or who are not critical right now, but who are anticipated to return when we return to full operations or sooner. The second type does not apply to faculty. For the second type, employees who are placed on furlough would be entitled to continued health insurance, with the employer continuing to pay for its share of the cost, at least for the first 3 or 4 months of any furlough. A furlough does not constitute a break in service, and we believe that the accrual of leave continues. The third type is a voluntary furlough. The UW system policy also provides for some procedures for individuals to be able to request a furlough. Now that UW system has published a draft policy, we know that they're also developing FAQs that would further explain the details, which are rather technical, around the different types of furloughs. In anticipation of this system policy, we have been discussing the types of furloughs that are outlined, and it is highly likely that once the system policy is finalized, which we expect within a few days, and we make sure we understand the details, that we will then proceed with both an across-the-board furlough and position-specific furloughs. We have to do as much as we can to stretch our current reserves so that we can make it through the full duration of this crisis. As to the first type, the across-the-board furloughs, it is most likely that we would apply this for the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. We're currently looking at a base set of furlough days for 12-month employees with a reduced number for 9-month employees. We're also looking at a higher number of days for higher income employees. As to the second type, the position specific, it's likely that employees would be placed on furloughs in several stages. We will need to address very quickly those employees who are not currently working due to COVID, as well as employees in units that have been impacted by immediate losses. And again, the second type does not apply to faculty. We are working on draft guidelines that will outline how UWM would propose to implement the system-wide furloughs, as well as FAQs that would better explain that. We also are planning that we will need to have informational sessions for employees to help explain the impact of furloughs on them as soon as we're able to offer that. We have to and are looking at all other actions that we can to reduce expenses beyond our workforce. For example, we will be looking at our capital projects, especially those where UWM is contributing funding to those projects, and whether any delay or reduction in that funding would help us with our dealing with our financial situation here. As Chancellor Mone said in the Faculty Senate meeting yesterday, nothing is off the table for consideration. We are all going to need to work together, taking unprecedented action to find our path forward. I'm now going to pass it back to Chancellor Mone to see if he has any final comments before we move into answering questions.
I believe I'm live. Thank you. Robin, Johannes, thank you for your comments. I'm just going to offer a couple of quick comments and then we'll move into the Q&A. So I want to stress that as we face the future, as you've just heard, there are many uncertainties that require the type of scenario planning that Johannes outlined, the type of details that Robin has described. But I want to stress that aside from those uncertainties, there are several things that we know at this point. First, our financials in the short term today are significantly more challenged than they were even a month ago. They're going to be more stressed in the future. We are not alone. The New York Times article yesterday talked about higher ed in a way that you've never seen, describing the financial challenges affecting more than 4,000 institutions of higher education across the United States. We've seen a number of campuses already take action, and many more are planned, of course. The second thing is that we are receiving and will be receiving funding from federal and possibly state sources that will help us address the current and anticipated deficits. But those funds, as Robin described, will not be nearly enough to close the gap that we have already seen and what we know is going to be coming. So the third point comes very much into focus, and that is that the more decisive the financial measures that we take now, the more that we can maximize opportunities to preserve jobs, to provide employment security, and to especially increase the possibility for our operational capabilities in instruction, research, engagement, and campus operation to support these imperatives to be fulfilled. I want you to also know some other things that are very evident to me, and I hope to you. We have many major assets. We have you, our employees. And that's the most critical foundation upon which we're going to build and resume operations in the future. When I have discussions with legislators, business leaders, individuals that are important stakeholders as we go forward in the future, our alumni, letters that we've been sending to our congressional representatives and others, I continue to stress that we are so important as we seek to turn the economy back on, provide the talent, and continue to do what UWM does the best. I think that you know that we are the largest provider of talent in the state of Wisconsin for those students who are from Wisconsin and stay in Wisconsin. Over 5,000 graduates a year, 80% of whom stay in the area and fulfill the jobs that are most needed. Nothing is going to be more important in our future. The other things that are critical is the fact that our leadership team, and I know both Johannes and Robin, with their veteran status, with all the things that they've been able to do in their careers, and especially today, we could not be better situated, as well as the deans and our governance leads, the individuals with whom we've been collaborating and working as we've gone through this. And I also want to acknowledge our role as part of the system, and that does give us strength, and you'll benefit from knowing it's been a lot of the work that we've done with the system, directly to Congress and directly to other lobbying efforts that has been very helpful with the power and strength that we've got for the University of Wisconsin system. I think the other assets that we have are the resolve and the grit that denotes what we represent as Panthers. That's our hallmark, and we're going to continue to stay strong through this. And the final comment is that I continue to ask for your patience, recognizing that we will continue to focus on what is in the best interest of our students, this institution, and you. So that's just a few comments as we now turn it over to our Q&A. And I now would ask us to go ahead and move into this portion. Thanks for your patience. We'll have more than a half hour now for our questions.
Okay, looks like I can answer the first question, which is from Erica Hewlett. Thank you, Erica. The question is there any talk of expanding the use of COVID leave for things like depression, anxiety, AODA related to COVID isolation or quarantine? And will COVID leave be extended? Erica, I have not heard of any discussion about expanding the use of COVID leave beyond what's currently provided in the current COVID leave policy. Will COVID leave be extended? As of this time, we don't have an understanding that it will be extended beyond May 1st, although you never know what could happen. There have been developments every day, and the time is pretty short between now and May 2nd. Having said that, if there was an extension in COVID leave, I think it would be very modest if there is any extension. You know, we have not reduced our workforce at all since the beginning of this crisis, even in areas where employees are not able to work or where we've shut down operations and auxiliaries. So we're continuing to carry the full expense of running all of those operations, which is not going to be sustainable in light of the losses that we're likely to face. So I think if there were any extension to COVID leave, which is a system decision, it would merely be a stopgap before we have to get to the decisions that we have to make.
So I see Rebecca Klepper ask about the possibility of social distancing and the possibility to open the labs in summer. Rebecca, this is a discussion I also have with Mark Harris and some of the other deans. I know Brett Peters had the same question. Should the situation change as part of the fall scenario and it happens earlier, we will consult also with our crisis management team to see how can we actually case-by-case basis evaluate the situation to allow a more opening of some of the research labs on the campus. So that is definitely a discussion point, but at this point, we don't have yet a final answer for the research labs, but we are talking about that as well.
Okay. The next question is, if you're in a grant-funded position, are you still subject to being furloughed? So we would be looking to deans and division heads to determine who needs to be furloughed consistent with the implementation guidelines that UWM would develop. For positions that continue to be funded and where employees are still able to work, I think it's probably not likely, but it may depend on the specific circumstances.
The next question is that many big companies and institutions are setting up on-campus COVID-19 testing centers. Are we planning to take similar action? In case the campus reopens in the fall, what are the steps taken to minimize the health risk of the university community? This question has a lot of different answers, and there's many things that are unknown, but do know that we are already working with state, county, and other health authorities with respect to all the guidance for everything that we've been doing in terms of how we have been managing our students on campus, how we've effectuated the off-campus guidelines and so forth. But know this, we will be operating with the best capabilities available at the time. We will not open the campus in any way that is moving ahead of any of the state or federal or county types of guidelines with respect to whether it's social distancing, the type of testing that has to be done. I'm involved with several national boards, several educational organizations that are talking and describing very much with a lot of medical guidance, the types of testing, the types of sanitation, the types of social distancing rules and behaviors that would have to be involved. So we're monitoring that. We'll provide explicit instructions. As you can imagine, I think one of the clearest components that we're looking at right now is if we are able to have something, as the Provost described, in a hybrid type of environment where we're back in the fall online, but we also have some sort of on-campus operations, whether that comes early or later in the semester. We will be doing this in a very gradually opening type of role. As the governor said yesterday, as we know from leaders across the country, we're not going to simply flip a switch and be back to operations as normal. Embedded in that is the various needs that we have with different age groups, different individual risks of exposure and other things that many of you have been talking to us about, and what we're seeing as we anticipate with a forward look on that. But know that that's some time away, and we will provide ample communication and ample guidance in all ways possible to continue to make our campus safe. That has been and will continue to be a top priority for us.
Okay, off mute. Try that again. The next question that we received is somewhat similar to the question Chancellor Mone just answered, which is, once we come back to campus, employees will want to be assured that our facilities have been cleaned and disinfected from top to bottom. What is being done to undertake such deep cleaning? And I will say, as we were transitioning, moving offsite, our environmental services staff were cleaning restrooms and classrooms and then locking them behind, and they do know which areas were cleaned before we left campus. But this question relates to a number of other ones that we saw about return to operations, and I'll give you some examples of some of the other questions. For example, someone asked, my domestic partner is highly immunocompromised, and once we return to work, I don't want to bring the virus home. Might it be possible for employees to continue working from home if they feel unsafe? Similarly, there was a question about other high-risk individuals who may be our employees once we return to work. Other safety measures that might be employed after employees start to come to work. For all of those, I will say it is looking like we will have more time to prepare for a return back to campus than we did to prepare for leaving campus. And so these are all very good questions about what things will look like when we are back, particularly if we're in a situation where we're anticipating that there may be some resurging or setbacks, and we will need to prepare for all of those safety implications. We do have a very active emergency operations team that has been working to address these questions as they've arisen, including providing for the safety of our employees right now who are continuing to work on site. And we will get those teams working to help us prepare for on-site operations. But I think all of these questions are things that will need to be taken into account.
The next question is, how many furlough days will we need to take? Let me first mention that just yesterday afternoon, the executive committee of the Board of Regents reviewed a draft policy from System and gave their endorsement, but we're still working through some of the details in that. Our preliminary thinking at this point would be that for the across-the-board furlough, and I'm going to talk in a moment about the position-specific furlough, but for the across-the-board furlough, the initial thinking is 8 days, and that would be something that would occur in the fiscal year 2021, so effective July 1 through June 30th, 2021. So that's the opening. Then our planning right now is that by income level, there would be additional increments at different income levels. So stay tuned. I anticipate that by early next week, we would have the guidance out and what we're going to do for the across the board. I would want to recognize that for 100% appointments, 8 days would be the applicable guideline in practice. For our 9-month employees, that would be prorated to 6 days. For those of you who were here during the Doyle era, when we had furloughs before, that was a model that we employed at that time. But we will be doing something a little bit different with respect to graduated income levels. For, of course, the position-specific furlough, that would be different, as Vice Chancellor Van Harpen described, meaning that those days would be part-time or full-time and extended as needed, depending on the ability for our campus to come back to operational status. And then, of course, the voluntary furlough will be getting into details even further beyond that. The focus right now, to stress something that we've already heard, is first on across the board and the implementation of that, and then position-specific furlough, and there will have to be further consideration on that.
So sorry. We're trying to avoid background noise by putting ourselves on mute. The next question is similar, which is about avoiding a flat tax sort of furlough, but applying a greater furlough to those who earn more. And as Chancellor Mone just said, that is something that is being considered right now, with more details to be shared, hopefully next week.
So the question here is, given the radical immersion in online education going on globally, is there any strategic planning? I just want to minimize this, and the state level anticipating a different competitive market for students next fall and beyond. And I think, when I mentioned, it's a good question. And right at the beginning, and I was a bit rushed in my own presentation this morning, it's just all new. We look at the fall planning based on those 4 scenarios, but you also have to look at the future past the fall scenario. And that is where we say that the whole space for higher education will look differently, and probably a digital transformation that we have ever seen. And we have to be positioned, not that we say that on-site and the student experience is less important. I think in some extent it's even more important that we learn how many students appreciate, function well when they have that experience with a person on a one-on-one basis. But we also have to understand that more people that do take online, the more competitive we are in the market. The pricing of online courses will change. There will be a whole new landscape. And so we already start to plan to look at how will we continue with digital technologies, remote instruction, online instruction, in the post-COVID-19 era. So that is absolutely part of the strategic thinking beyond the fall. Thank you.
I want to just add a quick comment to Johannes's excellent answer. At the state level, this is something that is being discussed across the UW system, in particular with our UW extension. I want to stand back for a moment and point out that some people might look at the current scenario and say, well, we made the transition to online teaching for this semester. We've committed to it for the summer, but next fall we'll just do what's needed. I think we have to be prepared for online education to be part of higher ed in a different way for a long time, potentially forever. And what I mean by that is that next year, 2021, fall and spring, all the work that we're seeing nationally, and as you look across the whole landscape, including the medical advice, including policy, environmental perspectives, academic perspectives, we have to look at next year very much being an online year. Now, we want to bring the campus back if at all possible, but if you, again, follow the news and look at the incredible knowledge that we have even internal to UWM, in our biology, in our public health areas, in our other areas that are looking at across this, I think we have to be anticipating how do you differentiate yourself further in an online environment. While we've made the switch to online, I want to stress what's going to differentiate us and continue to differentiate us in the future is how effectively, how well we're online. We saw yesterday where campuses like Arizona State are specifically targeting students across the UW system with a lot of experience in the online environment. Southern New Hampshire University, very aggressively marketing. So the marketplace is going to become very, very crowded because everybody has gone online. So we have to think about differentiation. We have to think about the brand, not just in a regional concept, not just in a state concept, but truly in a national and international setting. We have some advantages there. We've been online more than any other campus in the state of Wisconsin. We had pre-COVID 11,000 students. We have been in discussions with Aaron Brower, who leads UW Extension, and we have a number of people in our campus that are nationally renowned in terms of a lot of the online learning components. So this is a very important part. UW-Milwaukee will continue to be a leader in the online platform and helping differentiate at a state level the types of things that we can do. So there's active discussion among chancellors and system, as well as the provost, really looking at expanding that aspect.
Okay, our next two questions relate to the application of furloughs. One of them is whether furloughs would be applied to graduate student assistants, and the other question is if faculty are in sabbatical, would their compensation fall under furlough? I would say the UW system policy does permit application of furloughs to graduate assistants. However, a determination has not yet been made on that for UWM purposes. Similarly, with the sabbatical leave, that isn't something that's been discussed yet, but these are very good questions. And as we see these specific questions come in, we will make sure that our policy does address those, but we don't have answers yet. And next question is, can I use earned vacation hours in place of furlough hours? And the answer to that is no, per the system policy. Once a person is placed on furlough, they would not have the ability to use other accrued leave to avoid the impact of the furlough. But they also would not lose that leave. That leave would remain banked for future purposes.
The next question is, why was the VSIP scrapped? In short, the VSIP, the Voluntary Separation Incentive Package, was scrapped because that's a very expensive way to lead to early retirement for individuals. I think you know that there was a 50% increment that would be added and we simply don't have the financial wherewithal to do that. In previous budget modeling pre-COVID, while we knew it was more expensive, it was also a better way to be able to handle separations. We simply don't have that mechanism, and I don't think you would find that mechanism. I know you wouldn't find that across any other campus in the UW system today, and I don't think you'd find that probably in organizations given the significant shortfalls that we have. So that's the short answer.
Next question is whether faculty would be able to donate time in furlough to those who may need it. That is not something that is covered in the draft system policy. It is something that we could ask about further. One of the challenges here is that furloughs is a new concept developed to deal with this situation in particular. We have had some furloughs in the past, but it's not something very commonly used. And so there are a lot of questions, as many people are raising right now, very good questions. And I think a lot of these we're going to need time to work through.
So the question is UWM advanced of being located in metropolitan area, and the question is, should we focus of all our student recruitment efforts in the Milwaukee area, as the preliminary evidence seems to suggest that the students would prefer to stay near their families in the current environment. And I think this question, thank you, relates also to our whole enrollment management planning in this current scenario. Actually, I just checked this morning again, we did a survey with our current students asking them if they plan to return in the fall semester. And the good news is that by far the vast majority of our students actually indicated that they do plan to come back. Now, we didn't, not everybody answered that, but at least it was good news that students still continue or plan to continue their education on our own campus coming the fall. And I've seen that some of the research that has been done indicated indeed that students and parents would decide that they really would like to have their students stay at home or close to home, which is a benefit for us here in Milwaukee. And I checked again this morning just with Jonathan and Dave and said, where are we in terms of southeastern Wisconsin and Milwaukee? And we focus indeed on our own metropolitan area in the recruitment of students. We are going to send out a chancellor's letter to our prospect students in this area with a Panther Welcome Scholarship announcement for them. And I've also just learned this morning from our enrollment management people that the confirming deposits in our area is actually up by 2.1% in comparison to last year this time. So these are good news, and this is actually a very appropriate question on our enrollment planning for the fall. And the second question, by when would we need to know what the campus courses can take place in the fall, and what is the deadline to prepare the campus, the dorms, etc. I think, as I've mentioned, we work on these scenario plannings. Actually, we have already done a lot of planning, and this week we will continue the discussion with the deans, the associate deans, the shared governance groups, to make a decision as soon as possible. I think on the deadline specifically for the dorms, Kelly Haag might know more about that, and we can make that more available on the Q&A. But I would say, based on the scenario planning on the second scenario, we should start planning for a kind of a hybrid return if it is indeed the scenario how it plays out. And if faculty, if I was a faculty or instructor, I would say, if I have to teach more online, and I have the opportunity to do additional training through CETL or other opportunities, I will in any case start doing that in preparation for the fall semester. But we would like to give an answer to that question as soon as possible to also help with the planning.
Okay, just to add to Johannes's last answer, speaking for our Chief Student Affairs Officer, Kelly Haag, I know we would need at least the month of August to prepare our residence halls for return, but President Cross has discussed ensuring that decision is made for fall before middle July, so that we have enough time to do that. So next question, could furloughs take the form of reduced hours based on availability of work? This is something that we have been asking UW system to address in a furlough policy or some other policy, because we agree that that kind of flexibility would be very helpful for it not to be all or nothing. Right now, the interim system policy provides only for either consecutive full day furloughs, that's the position specific furloughs, or the across the board intermittent furloughs, but the intermittent furloughs are limited to a maximum of 1 day for every 2-week pay period. So currently it does not provide for that. They are working to see if they can help us come up with some sort of method that would allow that. It just is taking more time to develop policy around that, and there are some legal complexities involved. So hopefully we'll see some additional information on that soon as well.
So the question here is, many of the healthcare professional programs have courses that occur in the clinical sites, and other programs have experiential learning at various employers. Do you anticipate that there will be any guidelines developed to assist our decisions for student placements in the clinical education courses? And the answer is yes. And even part of the summer for now, if it has to be done, I know health sciences, nursing, have some of these challenges, is if it's at all possible to move this to the end of summer should the situation changes, that it can happen. And we are working with our crisis management team on these guidelines. For example, if a clinical site says, well, at this point in time, we do accept students coming in, it is safe and we can happen, that might be one of the criteria that we will build in. So the answer to this in short is yes, we will look at that.
The next question is, do you anticipate treating payroll for furloughs as you did last time, with a small amount being deducted from each paycheck? Essentially, that is how the across the board furloughs work. We do have to pay people as they work. So as employees take unpaid leave, unpaid days off, that essentially would then be reflected in that paycheck. But we would spread out the days off throughout the year in order to have the result being a smoothened effect over the 12 months of the year, essentially. And we are, the policy does not permit us to allow more than 1 furlough day for every 2-week pay period. That would be the maximum. But again, we would spread it out in order to essentially achieve that. But it wouldn't be a flat reduction in salary from every paycheck, but rather it would reflect the actual time worked.
The next question is to me. Across the nation, university presidents, chancellors, and their top leadership are taking pay cuts. Will I be announcing my own pay cuts and those who work with me who make 6 figures? There's a couple facets of this. First, the answer is yes to all of that. The issue that I mentioned earlier, where individuals at graduated income level are going to take more pay cuts, that will affect individuals above 6 figures and beyond more. So yes, I will be taking a pay cut. Many leaders across the campus will, and we'll be making that announcement soon. In addition, as we determine what our policies are, I'm looking at a significant increase in my contribution to scholarship funds, and we'll be making an announcement about that in the near term as well. So the answer to that question is yes.
So this question is, given that the most summer internships are being cancelled and students will have very little options to find other non-disciplinary jobs during the summer, is there a push to offer more classes this summer to fill this gap? I think we have the registrar, the schedule for the summer is kind of finalized, students can enroll. So my hope would be that students will take the opportunity also to take more classes during the summer, actually to get close to their own graduation.
So the next question is, if the DNC is still held in Milwaukee, won't they need the resident halls? The DNC, as you know, has been pushed back to the second or third week of August. And what we've determined for some of the groups that need the residence halls, that would not work. The timing is so close to when we actually have students moving back in and the preparation of the residence halls that we have declined the opportunity. When originally there had been an event that was going to be taking place in July, DNC timing, we had in the neighborhood of 1,500 individuals who are going to be using our residence halls, and we have declined that for the August DNC. So that's, I think, the short answer on that.
Next question is whether we anticipate that schools, colleges, and divisions will be given new budget targets to help manage the fiscal crisis, and if so, when would we know? Most likely, yes. However, as anyone who has been involved in the budget building process knows, there's a huge amount of work and process that goes into that, and right now, all units and our campus is in the process of submitting our budget to UW system, and we've been asked and directed to just proceed on that technical process with the pre-COVID information, and all of system is doing that as well, and then we will come back in and work with the new reality in terms of the budgets. So I think the first step is going to be looking at any measures we can take to begin to immediately reduce expenses. We will then have to come back and likely readdress budgets in the meantime. However, I do want to emphasize we had already planned on some fairly significant expense reductions across the campus for FY21, and it's more important than ever before that all units are working to, at a minimum, meet those expense targets, which are very important. This does not mean that those are just abandoned and wait and see what happens, but rather we have to be working towards those, and then we will come back in and have a plan for addressing any adjustments as soon as we can.
The next question, in the planning, will this situation create greater opportunities to integrate courses between campuses? I think we will continue to integrate more of what we already do with system already has an integrated approach to some of the online. We have the nursing programs, we have data sciences programs, data security programs, and part of the discussion we are having at system level is really actually to look at more integration specifically in the online world of the integration of courses between campuses. So that is exactly already in discussion. But I do think, and actually I know that after this crisis, we will actually be forced in a way to coordinate more what we do in terms of courses.
Okay. 2 additional questions about furloughs. One is, will furloughs create a break-in service that would restart the clock to becoming vested? And this is specifically addressed in the draft UW system policy, which states that a furlough assignment will not be considered a break-in service for the purpose of calculating continuous employment or continuous service. UW system has been working with ETF to make sure that they can accurately address the impact of furloughs on benefits and retirement in particular. So I would say I believe that's already addressed, but we should continue to look at that policy and the FAQs from system that will be developed. Also, the draft furlough document indicates that UW-Madison employees are not included in the policy. The reason for that is that UW-Madison is under a separate personnel system from UW-Milwaukee and the rest and the comprehensives. And so whenever new personnel policies are developed, they have their own. However, we've been working UW system and with UW-Madison to ensure that we're proceeding very similarly, just as what happened with the COVID leave policy. So they will have a similar furlough policy in effect and made available to them. That's our understanding, but they are in a separate personnel system.
I'm sorry. You can tell this is our first town hall. This is a pilot in many ways, so we will get better as we do this. Let me first start my closing comments by thanking everybody. We've had roughly 1,500 people on during the duration of this town hall, and we've gotten to an awful lot of the questions. And I want to stress that every single question that we did not get to, I don't know how many there are, will be answered on our FAQs. Again, I want to refer you to the website. It's uwm.edu/coronavirus. Very important for you to be able to keep track of a lot of things, and the website has continued to be improved in terms of being able to navigate to find answers to those frequently asked questions. We do plan on having our next town hall for students. We also will be having additional faculty and staff town halls as we continue to go through the COVID period. I want you to know that this can be played back. You can go to the Microsoft Teams website and you can play that back. It's available at uwm.edu/chancellor, and you can re-enter this Teams meeting. Later, this will be available on a YouTube playback. So I want to once again thank you. The things that we've done so far have been tremendous. We're going to continue to do those things and do them very well to continue with our instruction, teaching, research, and engagement activities. There's a lot of people who need us in many, many ways, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. Thank you.